Hi everyone, I'm Byrd and welcome back. Today I'm showing you how to make a pot holder from the scraps left over from our DIY apron tutorial. If you haven't seen the apron video yet, be sure to check it out on my channel. It's simple, no pattern needed at all, a perfect project for the holidays. The neckties are completely adjustable and there are lots of pockets, so be sure to check it out. All right, so let's get into the details about the supplies that you'll need for today's pot holder. All right, so these are the things that you will need to create your own pot holder. I'm using scraps from the apron project. I started off with about 1.5 yards of fabric and I was able to make the apron, and I have plenty of fabric left to make the pot holder. Now my pot holder pieces are roughly 9 by 7 inches. You can certainly be creative and customize this based on whatever speaks to you. And then I used leftover pre-quilted fabric. I cut 2 of those. And then the real secret sauce in making a pot holder is you want to make sure that you have insulated fleece. This is really important to make sure that you have a pot holder that's going to be heat proof, as well as, I'm not going to say fire retardant, but maybe fire resistant. So you definitely want to make sure that you have at least 1 layer of this. And if you want, you can go ahead and add 2 layers, and you're going to sandwich that right in between your fabric. So I have 2 of the exterior pieces of fabric and then 2 of my pre-quilted fabric. So just going to lay my fabric face down. I'm going to put 1 layer of the pre-quilted right on top. I am now going to sandwich in that insulated fleece. I'm going to place the other pre-quilted on top, and then finally on the outside, the exterior fabric. And then you're going to go ahead and put pins or clips all the way around. And we're going to take it to the sewing machine in just one moment. The other thing that you will need for a nice clean finish around the edges of your pot holder is bias tape. You do want to cut this on a bias because you want a little bit of stretch. So as you're applying the bias tape around the corners, you'll have that stretch to make it lay really nicely. Now this is about 2.5 inches wide. You certainly can make this more narrow if you want. It could be 2 inches or even 1.5 inches. I really wouldn't go any smaller or more narrow than that, because you have 5 pieces of fabric that you are binding together. So those are the only things that you'll need. And this is something that once you cut this out, cutting it out takes about 10 minutes. And then sewing it, I would say maybe takes another 10-15 minutes. It is so easy to make these custom pot holders for friends. And like I said, it is really great to add this as a holiday gift with the apron as well as the pot holder. All right, y'all, let's get into it and head over to the sewing machine. Go ahead and clip or either pin your raw edges together. Remember, you should have, in my instance, I have 5 different pieces of fabric, 2 of the exterior, 2 of the pre-quilted fabric because I had it in stock. Oh, I meant to mention, if you don't have pre-quilted fabric, you can certainly use fleece to create additional padding. And then on the inside, I have the very center, I have the insulated fleece. So I have 5 different pieces together. You want to go ahead and clip or pin those all around. Now what we're going to do, because this is 5 different pieces and it is a little bit, look how thick that is, a little bit fluffy. I am going to take it to my sewing machine, and I'm going to do, instead of a basting stitch, I'm going to do a very small zigzag stitch all the way around the perimeter right here along the raw edge. And by doing a zigzag stitch, it really begins to not only hold the 5 pieces together, but it squeezes this in, and it will make it a little bit easier when it's time to put on the bias binding. All right, so let me pull over my sewing machine. Going to get very close to the very edge and just begin zigzagging. Now this zigzag will not be seen at all once you put on your bias binding. It will totally cover that. But make sure that when you're doing the zigzag that you are very, very close to that raw edge. Mine is almost touching or almost going off the raw edge, but not really. And I'm going to take it out a moment before I continue so you can see what that looks like. So you can barely tell that I've done it, but look at the difference that it makes. So it went from being this thickness to that thickness. And so this little addition of the zigzag stitch really does make a big difference when it's time for you to actually add your bias binding. So just go ahead and do that zigzag all the way around your pot holder. All right, so that looks pretty good. And if you need to trim off any excess around the edges, go ahead and do that now. Sorry, got a little phone call. I'm not sure who it was, but they'll call back. And go ahead and grab that bias binding. And remember, you want to make sure that you did cut that on the bias. That is really important because you want to have a little bit of stretch in your woven fabric. Once you've done that, take it over to your ironing board, and you can see that I just simply press the edges in toward the center. And if you wanted to press yours in so that they're actually touching, that's totally fine. This was personal preference, but fold them in. And then once you folded them in, grab your pot holder again, and then turn your bias binding down so it is right sides facing to your pot holder and align the raw edges. Go ahead and grab a pin or a clip. Now on that very end where you start, actually I'm going to move this one down a little bit because I want to have a little bit of room. So when you first get started, what I'd like you to do is just simply fold to the wrong side. So you can see how I just folded that bias down. Just fold that down and put a pin there. Now continue to go all the way around, and honestly clips for me on the edges works pretty good. Clips is actually my preference, to be honest with you anyway. Go ahead and pin or clip all the way around. And then once you have pinned or clipped all the way around, you're going to go back to your sewing machine, and in that crease, in the crease of the binding, that first crease of the binding, you're going to sew the binding down to your pot holder. So go ahead and pin all the way around and then sew down on the wrong side. So right side's facing, but on the wrong side, sewing the bias binding down onto the pot holder. All right, so you should have sewn your bias binding all the way down around the pot holder. Now, what I forgot to mention to you is as you get to that area where you started, just continue to go over the place where you started, where you had that little bit of a fold. So just continue to sew over that. I went probably about an inch beyond it. It doesn't really matter as long as you go beyond it. And I'm just going to cut away the extra fabric because I won't need it. That little fold was important because it actually creates a nice clean end to your bias binding. There are a number of different ways that you can do this. This is probably one of the easiest ways for me, but lots of different ways that you can do it. There's no, I'm going to say right or wrong. It's all about what really speaks to you. Okay, let me get rid of that extra thread. Good time to clean up. Lots of thread here. So good time to kind of clean up the extra pieces of thread. Now, once you have done that, we are so close to finishing this. There is literally just one seam left and you have a custom pot holder. You could make one of these for every single person in your family, every single teacher in the school. If that's something that you want to do, I think that they would very much enjoy it. I think it would be a really neat gift for even the men in your life who like to grill. They need a pot holder too. Okay, so while I was talking, if you did not see that, let me talk you through what I just did. Was I just simply flipped the binding over, tucking in. And if you need to trim around the edges, feel comfortable trimming around the edges a little bit because it should tuck really nicely. So just go ahead and tuck it all the way in. This one feels like it's a little overlap. I'm going to clean that one up. All right, so now that's what it looks like on one side. Of course, we have not sewn this down yet, but it looks really good. It is definitely shaping up. I am going to now, it doesn't really matter where you start it, but where you have that fold, and I can see I could probably have folded mine a little bit more deeply, but I think I am good. You're going to just go ahead, and I'm just making sure that I'm lining this up neatly, because this one seam, you want to make sure that you're able to catch in this raw edge, but also keeping it neat. So that's really what I'm looking to make sure that when I sew over it, it will catch both sides. And you're going to just continue to kind of tuck it under, and I'm going to start in the middle here. Do it any way that speaks to you. But what I'm trying to do is, as I um, tuck over or tuck in that other folded edge, I just want to make sure that I'm kind of lining it up with the seam underneath, so that when I sew it down, it catches it in. I don't have to go back over it, and it's going to look just perfect. So continue to do this all the way around. I've put lots of clips all the way down to secure the binding to the, I'm getting ready to say apron, but it's not the apron, but it's a reminder, guys, if you want to learn how to do a DIY, no pattern needed, matching apron, you can find that tutorial on my YouTube channel as well. Also, it's probably another good time to remind you guys, if you are new to me, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you've been with me for a while, you already know how much I appreciate you guys. I couldn't do this without you, so thank you so very much. Okay, so lots of clips. Go ahead and grab your sewing machine. I am going to choose to begin sewing on the side where we begin. So what I mean by that is you already have the seam that is complete. So I'm trying to figure out what the best way to say this, but we started by putting the raw edges together here. This is the side that I am going to sew the final bias binding it down. And this is the very last stitch that you'll need, and you will have your potholder completely done. I'm going to do it on this side because I want to stitch right in the ditch. And I'm going to take my time. I wanted to make sure that as I was clipping, that I had the folds of the other side, that it would overlap that stitching just a little bit, so you won't see the stitching on the other side. And I'm going to be honest with you that sometimes when you do this, you may turn it over and realize, oh, I see some stitching. Just unpick it and then go back in and clean it up. So you can start anywhere that speaks to you. And again, trying to stitch right in the ditch. And what that means is stitching where that seam already exists. And you're just going to go all the way around. The key is when you get to the curved edges, take your time. This is a beginner, easy DIY project. And if it means that every now and then you have to pull out your seam ripper, it's really not the end of the world. So go ahead and sew all the way around. And just like that, guys, we are all done. I had a little bit of the bias binding left over. So what I decided to do was I sewed along the narrow edge, right along the folded edge, all the way down the length of the tie, and created basically a little bit of a hang loop. I think this definitely elevates it. I will be adding this to future potholder makes, and this is really easy. And I just sewed it onto one side. So that looks really nice. I love the entire set, the adjustable apron and as well as the potholder. Remember, you can choose any fabric that speaks to you, certainly a woven fabric that does not stretch. You can use a canvas, you can use a twill, you can use a denim. And I like the fact that I used a fabric that isn't tied specifically to the holidays, although I can use it around the holiday. It is a fabric that I can have up and out and about in the kitchen all year round. it is a fabric that I won't stick away in a box and won't see it for another 12 months. So I'm going to be using this. Thanks again so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys so much. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Happy sewing.